Why was marriage considered the most successful financial transaction in a person's life during the Victorian era? In a world of tight corsets and strict rules, love was a luxury available only to a few. High society lived by the laws of cold calculation, where contracts for the transfer of land were hidden behind beautiful facades. Watch the video to the end to find out how American millionaires saved the British aristocracy from ruin and what the true price of a title was in the 19th century. What if I reveal the best-kept secret of success in London high society? For a young girl, coming out was not a celebration, but an entry into a real marketplace. Parents spent years preparing their daughters for the season, investing huge sums in dresses and teachers. Every move at the ball was evaluated by potential buyers in the form of wealthy heirs. The goal of this marathon was to get the most lucrative offer before the end of the summer. The bride's family sought to marry off their daughter in order to strengthen their position in society. Any display of sincere feelings for an unsuitable candidate was nipped in the bud with strict instructions. The girl understood that her future depended on successfully demonstrating her manners. The ball in a private mansion became a place for preliminary negotiations between the heads of families. While the young people danced the quadrille, their fathers discussed the size of the dowry and the terms of the transfer of rights. No one hid the fact that marriage was a way of combining two capitals or estates. In this world, romance was just a beautiful cover for harsh interests. A successful marriage ensured a girl a comfortable life, but deprived her of the right to choose. She passed from the authority of her father to that of her husband, becoming a decoration of the house. Often, the bride saw her spouse only a few times before the vows at the altar. The main thing was that he matched her status and had no scandals in his family tree. Preparing for a wedding was like preparing for a major military maneuver. The mothers of brides studied the genealogies of potential suitors as if they were maps of the terrain. They were not looking for a kind heart, but for debt-free estates and connections. Every detail of the wardrobe had to emphasize the wealth and nobility of the family. Young people were also under intense pressure from their relatives. Young men were taught that it was their duty to save the family name through a profitable union. Romantic infatuations with actresses or poor girls were considered dangerous recklessness. A rational approach to choosing a life partner was welcomed by all strata of society. Social balls served as a showcase where each commodity had its own clear price. Men evaluated not only appearance, but also the potential political influence of their father-in-law. Girls hoped that their future husband would at least be tolerable to communicate with. The exchange of pleasantries was only a formality before signing serious papers. If the deal fell through at the last moment, it was a disgrace for the whole family. Parents tried to find a replacement immediately so as not to waste time and money. The reputation of an unsold bride could close the doors to many homes for years to come. Therefore, the pressure on young people was almost unbearable. In this theater of the absurd, feelings were considered a side effect that could interfere with business. The ideal marriage looked like a merger of two corporations with clear assets. Happiness was measured by the number of servants and the size of the annual income from rent. The rest was considered fairy tales that had nothing to do with real life. I'm curious to hear your point of view. Can such a system be considered more honest than modern relationships? Please tell us what you think about this, because every opinion is valuable. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new details. Are you ready to learn the truth about how marriage contracts were actually signed? After the parties formally agreed, experienced family lawyers immediately got involved. They drew up detailed marriage contracts that could run to dozens of pages of thick parchment. These documents specified everything from the wife's maintenance to the rights to the family silver. Particular attention was paid to the issue of ownership of land and urban real estate. If the bride brought a rich dowry, her relatives tried to protect these funds from being squandered. There were special funds, the income from which was intended exclusively for the woman's needs. Men, on the other hand, sought to gain complete control over the assets for their own interests. Such negotiations could last for months and lead to breakups over small sums of money. Lawyers haggled over every village and every brick in an extension to the estate. The personal qualities of the groom or bride were almost never mentioned in these discussions. The only things that mattered were the liquidity of the property and the purity of the ancient title. The marriage contract became a guarantee of the family's continued influence, whatever the outcome. In Victorian England, divorce was virtually impossible, so the terms determined the rest of one's life. The death of one of the spouses was also spelled out in detail in terms of inheritance. It was cold mathematics with no room for spontaneity. Lawyers often met in closed offices to discuss the smallest details of the dowry. They checked bank accounts and the existence of hidden debts among future relatives. Every word in the contract could be worth thousands of pounds in the future. Trust between families was minimal when it came to gold. Often the contract specified the amounts that the wife could spend on pins and dresses. This gave the woman at least some illusory autonomy within the family budget. The husband had no right to take this money if the clause was legally binding. Such details were vital for survival in a gilded cage. If the groom was an heir to a title but had no money, the conditions became even tougher. The family of a wealthy bride could dictate their rules for managing his ancestral lands. This often caused hidden animosity between the new relatives from the very beginning. Gold dictated the will of those who possessed only empty names. Parents from both sides were often present when the final versions of the documents were signed. They checked the signatures and seals with particular care and seriousness. At that moment, the marriage finally turned into a commercial transaction. Romance finally left the room, giving way to the dry clink of coins. Many historians find these documents in archives and are struck by their cynicism. There are clauses about the transfer of paintings, horses, and even furniture. Each item had its place in the overall scheme of strengthening family well-being. A person's identity dissolved into a list of their material assets. Do you think such harsh contracts protected women, or did they merely make them hostages? In the next chapter, you will learn why lords began hunting for brides from across the ocean. You've definitely never heard about this unique secret. At the end of the 19th century, the British aristocracy faced a serious financial crisis. Centuries of wealth and privilege did not save the family estates from ruin. Ancient castles began to crumble, roofs fell into disrepair, and there was simply not enough money to maintain the numerous servants. Even luxurious gardens had to be leased out or abandoned altogether. At the same time, new millionaires appeared in America who wanted not only to spend money but also to gain recognition in high society. They sought not only luxury, but also the social status that a European noble title conferred. This gave rise to a unique market where wealthy American women married impoverished dukes and lords. For the American side, it was a way to buy their way into the European elite, confirm their status, and secure their social position. For British lords, it was the only chance to save their family estate from being sold or falling into decline. It was an honest exchange of cash for an ancient English coat of arms, where everyone got what they lacked, money or a title. Such a union seemed pragmatic, but behind it lay personal tragedies and compromises that were only whispered about. Girls from New York were brought to London in groups for formal introductions to the Queen and high society. They possessed vast fortunes that allowed them to restore entire estates, maintain servants, and introduce new amenities. English mothers-in-law often looked down on them, calling them upstarts without manners, not understanding their habits and new customs. However, without their checkbooks, many aristocratic families would have simply disappeared, and palaces would have fallen into ruin. These women's money literally saved the country's history and architectural heritage. One of the most famous brides was Consuelo Vanderbilt, who married the Duke of Marlborough. Her dowry made it possible to completely restore Blenheim Palace to its former glory, but the girl herself remained unhappy. She cried under her veil, realizing that her personal life had been sacrificed for the sake of family interests and tradition. The Duke openly admitted that he had married only to save his estate, not for love. This union was an example of how money and title brought people together for profit, not happiness. American millionaires often actively sought out titled sons-in-law for their daughters. They believed that kinship with a duke or lord justified any expense, travel, or effort. Their daughters often found themselves in a foreign country without friends or support. They had to quickly learn complex rules of etiquette, adapt to strict traditions, and endure the cold stares of the old nobility. Every mistake could cost them their reputation and sometimes even their safety in their new family. British society resisted the influx of these energetic and wealthy women for a long time. They were called new money and considered too vulgar for refined English traditions. They stood out for their openness, ability to spend money, and independence. But when the estate's debts reached critical levels, the aristocrats' pride quickly faded. Gold from Chicago or New York smelled just as pleasant as old rent, and sometimes saved the estate much more convincingly. Many of these marriages lacked even a hint of mutual affection from the outset. Spouses could live in different wings of a huge house and communicate only through servants. The woman acted as a financial sponsor, while the man acted as the bearer of a famous name in history. It was a symbiosis based on mutual benefit and social prestige, where feelings were pushed into the background. But it was precisely this union that allowed traditions and architectural heritage to be preserved for years to come. Interestingly, it was American women who brought a love of comfort and new technologies to England. The first heated bathtubs, electricity, and heating systems began to appear in old castles, making life much more comfortable. They transformed gloomy and cold ruins into cozy homes suitable for modern life, where ancient splendor could be combined with comfort. Their energy literally breathed new life into the fading British aristocracy, and the castles shone like never before. Today, many famous English estates exist only thanks to the investments of American heiresses. Tourists visit the castles, admire the luxurious halls, unaware of the dramatic fates of their former owners. The memory of the dollar princesses is preserved in the portraits that adorn the walls of the ceremonial halls. Their sacrifice and financial support helped preserve the history, culture, and architecture that we so cherish today. Like this video if you were struck by the fate of these girls who became living investments. Their stories are an example of how money and title, interests and duty can bring people together, creating complex destinies that affect the world and the legacy of entire generations. What you are about to learn will turn your idea of Victorian family life upside down. After the celebrations were over, many couples began to lead virtually separate lives. In large mansions, husbands and wives had their own separate quarters. They might not see each other for days unless a formal dinner was planned. This state of affairs was considered normal for maintaining dignity in high society. The husband spent his time in his clubs or study, managing the estate. The wife ran the household, engaged in charity work, and visited her numerous friends. Their communication was limited to formal conversations about plans for the evening's festivities. The lack of common interest was compensated for by strict adherence to etiquette and outward prosperity. In public, they always appeared as a united union, presenting an ideal picture of happiness. No one was to guess that indifference reigned behind closed doors. Quarrels were considered a sign of bad taste and very low origins. Children in such families were often raised by nannies, seeing their parents only on a schedule. The main task of the spouses was to produce an heir who would continue the family line and preserve the capital. Once this mission was accomplished, the spouses could finally distance themselves from each other. Each found solace in their hobbies or circle of friends. This isolation helped to avoid unnecessary conflicts over everyday matters. Each had their own area of responsibility and their own rules within the home. Spouses respected each other's personal space as long as it did not violate propriety. This created an illusion of stability, which was so important to society. If a husband or wife had an affair, they tried to keep it quiet. The main condition was complete confidentiality and the absence of public scandals. As long as the outer shell of the marriage remained intact, internal problems were ignored. The hypocritical morality of the time allowed for a lot, provided it was kept quiet. In some homes, even breakfast was served at different times for each spouse. They could exchange notes through servants while in the same building. Such a life seemed natural to people who had grown up in an atmosphere of strict etiquette. Intimacy and emotional closeness were considered unnecessary and even dangerous. Gradually, the house turned into a museum where each resident was just an exhibit. Relationships resembled a frozen theatrical production with a predictable ending. Politeness replaced love, and duty became the only meaning of existence. Many lived like this for decades, never knowing the true character of their partner. The servants were the only witnesses to this quiet drama of alienation and coldness. They saw their masters pass each other in the corridors without a word. But the staff's code of silence was as strict as their master's rules. The secrets of Victorian bedrooms rarely left the confines of the massive walls. Do you agree that such distance helped preserve marriages for many years? In the next chapter, you will learn how aristocrats found joy outside their official unions. Public opinion in the 19th century had enormous power over people's destinies. It formed slowly but had an instant impact on those who dared to deviate from the norm. A person whose behavior did not meet established expectations and social standards instantly became a real outcast in society. Their actions were discussed and criticized behind closed doors, and rumors spread faster than the person could refute them. For a woman, the loss of reputation meant complete isolation from all previous contacts and the possibility of being rejected even by her closest relatives. Even in the most unhappy marriages, spouses tried to save face in front of their neighbors, demonstrating outward harmony and submission, regardless of their inner state. Rumors and gossip were the main entertainment in the salons of those harsh times. Every action of an aristocrat was discussed in minute detail, from clothing and manners to the content of letters. Any hint of suspicion of infidelity could permanently close the doors to high society and destroy a career or social position. Men, of course, had more freedom in their behavior, but even they were forced to observe the boundaries of propriety and carefully demonstrate their feelings. Any public misdemeanor could become a source of endless gossip and condemnation. Women were under much closer scrutiny from relatives, servants, and society at large. They had to be models of virtue and devotion to their homes, strictly observing the rules of etiquette and propriety. Even if her husband openly neglected his duties or committed misdemeanors, a wife was obliged to remain faithful and patient. Humility was considered the main female virtue and a guarantee of peace in the family, and any attempt to defend one's personal opinion could be perceived as a sign of disobedience or scandal. Maintaining one's image required enormous energy and constant self-control. Every letter, every meeting, and every gesture could be misinterpreted by ill-wishers. People lived in a state of perpetual performance in front of their friends, neighbors, and servants. Sincerity was considered a dangerous weakness, capable of destroying the status and trust that family members had built up over the years. Any display of emotion beyond the bounds of propriety could result in rumors and social condemnation. Families often united in the face of external threats or potential scandals to protect their collective reputation. Defending the family honor always took precedence over personal grievances and disappointments. If there was a risk of publicity, relatives made every effort to immediately cover it up, sometimes using influence, money, or threats. Silence in the home and maintaining an outward appearance of calm were a guarantee of preserving the family's political influence and capital. Mutual politeness was the glue that held together completely different people, united by the need to follow the rules. They exchanged pleasantries and courteous phrases, understanding that this was part of their work on image and social security. Those around them appreciated the predictability that such formal and cold relationships provided. In the Victorian world, order and discipline always took precedence over human feelings, and any display of emotion had to be carefully concealed. Lonely walks, unexpected encounters, or strange acquaintances could become the subject of a whole investigation and discussion. Neighbors kept a close eye on who entered the house, who they talked to, and at what time. Every carriage trip was recorded by invisible observers in bonnets and tailcoats, ready to report on any unusual events. Privacy was virtually non-existent for those at the top of the social ladder, and every step was controlled by the invisible hand of public opinion. Newspapers of the time often printed hints of scandals in high society, creating an atmosphere of constant tension and apprehension. Names were not mentioned directly, but everyone understood who was being referred to, and this forced spouses to be even more cautious in their secret passions. The fear of public disgrace and possible reputational disaster was stronger than any desire for change or personal happiness. Even religion was used as a tool to control the behavior of noble persons and demonstrate their moral superiority. Attending church on Sundays was a mandatory ritual for maintaining status, and the family bed served as a display of unity and harmony before God and man. It was another link in the chain of duties and prohibitions that reinforced social roles and emphasized the need for outward compliance with norms. Ultimately, a person did not belong to themselves, but to their social class, family, and duties to society. They were obliged to play a role written long before their birth, obeying all prescribed norms and expectations. Any deviation from the script threatened disaster for the entire family line, destruction of reputation, and loss of influence. Therefore, masks were worn until the very last breath, and personal feelings and desires were hidden behind a multi-layered facade of strictness and politeness. Are you ready for the shocking truth about where the Lords spent their time? Men's clubs in London were a place where gentlemen could take a break from their family roles. There they felt safe from the gaze of their wives and moralists. In these establishments, the fate of empires was decided and fortunes were lost at cards. A man could spend whole days at the club, returning home only to sleep. It was a space of freedom where one could smoke cigars and drink. For many lords, the club was more comfortable than their own huge and cold homes. Wives were strictly forbidden from entering these establishments under any pretext. In response, women created their own social circles for mutual support. Tea parties and charity committees were a way to escape their husband's supervision. In these close circles, they discussed ways to manipulate their spouses for their own purposes. The ladies learned to get what they wanted by exploiting men's weaknesses and the rules of etiquette. Often, such women's alliances became a powerful tool for influencing city politics. Through their husbands, women promoted the right people or blocked decisions. It was a hidden power that was not advertised, but was felt in all spheres. Formally obeying men, women often steered the family ship themselves. The clubs were dominated by an atmosphere of male brotherhood and a complete absence of female control. The walls of these buildings held more secrets than the state archives of the time. Here, one could be oneself without fear of a spouse's disapproving gaze at dinner. The clubs were a kind of psychological refuge for those who were tired of pretense. For women, the only place of power was their own living room. Here they received friends and built complex social combinations for their children. Their skill in conversation allowed them to learn the news before the official newspapers. Information was their main weapon in the struggle for the survival of the family. Mutual disregard for each other's interests became a kind of unspoken agreement between spouses. The husband did not ask questions about spending on hats and visits to dressmakers. The wife was not interested in late-night returns and losses at the club's cardroom. This allowed both to maintain the illusion of comfort within the marriage. Interestingly, it was during this period that women's clubs became popular. Women began to demand their own spaces to discuss literature and politics. This provoked fury among conservatives, who saw it as a threat to family values. But the process of change had already begun and could not be stopped. Men's clubs remain a symbol of that closed and elitist era. They are a reminder of a time when life was divided into two different worlds. Each world had its own laws, language, and system of unwritten rules. These worlds merge only for brief moments during formal dinners. Do you think this separate life was a salvation for people's mental health? In the next chapter, we will examine what happened if there were no heirs in a marriage. The main goal of any aristocratic marriage was the birth of a legitimate male heir. This was not just a wish of the parents, but an absolute requirement of society and the law, which determined the future of the family. Without an heir, the title and property could pass to distant relatives on the male line, which threatened the loss of control over the capital accumulated over centuries. This put enormous pressure on women, who felt guilty even at the slightest delay in pregnancy or problems with childbearing. Each pregnancy was perceived as an important event, affecting not only the life of the family, but also the fate of the entire family, and was prepared for with trepidation and solemnity. If only daughters were born into the family, it was considered a tragedy for the future of the family name. Girls could not inherit the land assigned to the family name by special old deeds, and their future depended on a successful marriage. Parents had to spend huge sums on a dowry for each daughter to ensure her a decent place in society. A son, on the other hand, was the one who would increase the family's capital and continue the history of his ancestors, so his arrival was celebrated with special attention and joy. Each birth of an heir was perceived as a victory of the clan over time and fate. Questions of succession within the family often led to intrigue, disputes, and even legal proceedings. Relatives closely monitored the health of the head of the family, his wife and young children, trying to predict possible changes in the line of succession. The death of an heir at a young age could completely change the balance of power and affect the economy and politics of the region. Therefore, children were protected by all available means, including doctors, healers, and special precautions provided by the medicine and traditions of the time. Sometimes marriages between cousins were practiced to preserve property. Such unions made it possible to avoid the fragmentation of landholdings and the loss of money outside the family. They were carefully planned during the childhood of the future spouses by older family members, often wise grandparents, who were guided by the interests of the clan. Genetic risks were of little concern at that time compared to the loss of an estate or the weakening of the family's position. These marriages were seen as a strategic necessity rather than an expression of feelings. The absence of children in a marriage could be a cause for deep personal depression and despair. A woman was seen as having failed in her only duty to society and to her family line. A man felt that his life, achievements, and wealth would have no continuation and would disappear with him. This often led to a final breakup in such cold, formal relationships, and family life turned into a chain of responsibilities and anxieties. Sometimes families resorted to tricks to keep their property under their control. There were complex legal schemes for transferring rights through proxies, guardians, or specially created funds. But nothing could replace the joy of the birth of the long-awaited little lord, who became the center of the family's universe. All hopes and expectations were pinned on him, and his every smile was perceived as the salvation of the family and confirmation of its future greatness. The upbringing of the heir was a matter of national importance on the scale of the family castle and the family line. He was prepared to manage lands, people, and political processes from an early age, learning not only science and languages, but also manners, etiquette, and strategy. He had to be flawless in everything so as not to disgrace the family name and weaken the prestige of the family line. Any weakness of character was perceived as a threat to the well-being of future generations and could provoke the intervention of older family members. Family portraits in galleries and on castle walls always emphasized the continuity of generations through the male line. Looking at his ancestors, a young man had to feel the weight of responsibility, a sense of duty, and the need to be worthy of his heritage. This was the upbringing of warriors, statesmen, and rulers, not just rich idlers who had inherited land and money. Duty to one's ancestors was more important than personal desires, inclinations, or dreams, and personal life was subject to social and family laws. Daughters were seen as a valuable asset for forming new alliances with other families. Their successful marriage could bring new lands, political support, or strengthen their father's financial position. Thus, children were perceived as tools in the great game for power, influence, and the preservation of family prestige. Love for them was certainly present, but it always had a practical undertone, intertwined with social obligations. The Victorian family was a fortress that had to stand forever, defying time, scandals, and external threats. Every brick in this wall was in its place, according to the law, ancestors, and rules of inheritance. The order of succession of titles, wealth, and land ensured that the world would not descend into chaos because of the personal dramas of individual family members. Stability, the preservation of the family heritage, and social status were the highest values for which it was worth living, working, and even dying, sacrificing personal desires for the sake of the future of the family. Life in a country estate was very different from the hustle and bustle of London in the last century. A large house was a complex mechanism that required constant supervision and huge investments. Land ownership gave the right to vote in Parliament and high status among neighbors. The mansion served as a backdrop for displaying the wealth and hospitality of important hosts. Hunting seasons brought dozens of guests from all over the country to the estates at the same time. The hosts had to provide impeccable service, entertainment, and exquisite food for their guests. Such receptions were part of a strategy to strengthen ties and find advantageous matches. Deals were made in the woods during the hunt, which were later formalized in writing. A huge number of servants worked behind the scenes to create an atmosphere of easy living. Butlers and housekeepers knew all the secrets of their hosts, but were obliged to remain silent. There was a strict hierarchy among the staff, which reflected the structure of society itself. The house was a miniature state where everyone knew their place. Maintaining such an estate required the talents of a good manager and an experienced accountant. Many aristocrats themselves delved into the details of managing farms and their forests. Marriages of convenience often brought people with business acumen into the family. The economic efficiency of the estate was a guarantee that the children would not go bankrupt. Land was the only truly reliable asset in the eyes of the Victorian aristocrat. Stocks and bonds were considered risky and not always worthy of high status. Only hectares of fertile soil and forest could ensure the eternal prosperity of a family name. Therefore, the boundaries of estates were fought over in court with particular ferocity. The estate was also a place where the owner acted as the supreme judge. He took care of his tenants and built schools and churches on his land. It was a system of mutual obligations based on traditions and ancient customs. Relations with local residents determined the lord's reputation throughout the district. Women on the estates also had important social and economic roles. They looked after the gardens and greenhouses and organized celebrations for the village children. They were a gentle force that smoothed over any rough patches in relations with the people. Without their involvement, life in the wilderness would have been too harsh. In winter, the estates often fell silent and life moved to warm city apartments. But in spring, everything returned to normal with new energy and plans. The estate was an anchor that kept the family in the stormy ocean of social change. It gave a sense of belonging to history and the great land of the ancestors. Many architectural masterpieces of that time have been preserved precisely because of this love for the land. The owners put their hearts and souls into every portico and every statue in the park. They built for centuries, hoping that their great-grandchildren would walk here. It was a belief in the eternity of their family and the immutability of their rights. Today, these parks are open to anyone who wants to touch the great past. We admire the beauty of the lines without thinking about the hard work of thousands of people. The estates remain monuments of an era where calculation and grandeur went hand in hand. History here is frozen in stone and the rustle of old centuries-old oaks. The death of a husband often brought a woman long-awaited legal and financial freedom. A widow in Victorian England had far greater rights than a married woman. She could dispose of her inheritance independently and even run a large business. Many women only began to live a truly full life in this status. However, widowhood required strict mourning for a long period of time. Black dresses made of special fabric were mandatory attributes of this sad period. Society closely monitored how sincerely a woman mourned her spouse. Ending mourning too quickly could cause a wave of condemnation from relatives. Wealthy widows became desirable brides for those who wanted to improve their fortunes. They could afford to choose a partner based on their personal preferences, but many preferred to remain single, enjoying their independence and control. It was the only period in a woman's life when she was her own mistress. Managing capital required a woman to have certain knowledge of finance and law. Many widows successfully managed factories, farms, and merchant ships. They proved in practice that they were capable of being more than just a decoration in the living room. This social class of women paved the way for future changes in rights. Black clothing became a symbol not only of mourning, but also of special status. Widows could afford to be somewhat eccentric in their behavior, which was forgiven. They had already fulfilled their obligations to society and their husband's family. Now they could devote their time to their interests, science, or travel. Widows often moved to more compact and comfortable homes in cities. There they created their own salons, where interesting people of the time gathered. Freedom from their husband's supervision allowed them to invite those who were interesting to them. It was an intellectual freedom unavailable to young married women of the Victorian era. Some widows never remarried, fearing the loss of their autonomy. They understood that a new marriage would once again make them dependent on a man's will. The experience of their first marriage of convenience often discouraged them from repeating such experiments. It was better to be the mistress of their own capital than to become part of someone else's deal again. History knows many examples of widows who built real financial empires. They used their resources to develop education and medicine in England. Their names often appear on the lists of founders of famous museums and libraries. It was a time of creation, accessible to women through the loss of a loved one. Thus, widowhood was both a grief and a unique opportunity for growth. Women emerged from the shadows of their spouses and became independent players. Their voices began to be heard louder, and their decisions had real weight in the world. It was the end of a long journey within the strict Victorian morality. By the beginning of the 20th century, the rigid system of marriages of convenience began to show noticeable cracks. Laws governing women's rights began to change gradually, and now they could own their earnings and property without relying entirely on their husbands. Ideas of equality, personal freedom, and self-fulfillment permeated all levels of society, casting doubt on the necessity of old traditions. The younger generation increasingly rebelled against arranged marriages and insisted on the right to choose a partner for love rather than convenience. These changes gradually destroyed centuries-old customs when marriage was the main tool for strengthening the family and status. Industrial development created new ways of acquiring wealth that no longer depended solely on land or hereditary titles. Titles and noble ranks began to lose their magical power in the face of technology, trade, and change. The old aristocracy was forced to adapt to a world where personal achievement, business acumen, and entrepreneurial spirit were valued as much as noble ancestry. The era of grand deals at the altar gradually faded into the past, along with oil lamps and the strict rules of Victorian etiquette. The First World War finally destroyed the familiar way of life of high society. Many estates were left without heirs, and heavy taxes and economic difficulties forced families to sell their land and property. Women went to work in hospitals, factories, and community organizations, finding new roles outside the home and the opportunity to live independently. The traditions of Victorian marriage gradually became beautiful legends, old novel plots, and memories that no longer fit into a rapidly changing world. We look back and see a world where people sacrificed their own happiness for stability, duty, and the preservation of status. It was a cruel but logical system of coordinates that lasted for decades and shaped generations of people who lived under the constant pressure of rules and expectations. Marriages of convenience built great houses and preserved family traditions, but the price was too high. It was measured in lost personal freedom and limited joy. Each generation now decides for itself what is more important: contract, status, and money, or sincere feelings, love, and personal happiness. New money from industry and commerce began to dictate its own rules in London and other major cities. The owners of factories, mills, and banks no longer sought to marry into ruined counts and dukes at any cost. They created their own elite based on energy, labor, knowledge, and innovation, rather than just pedigree and inheritance. The old world gradually merged with the new, giving birth to a modern social structure where merit, ability, and money could replace titles and noble origins. Education became available to women on a much larger scale than ever before. Girls began to dream of careers as doctors, teachers, scientists, or even lawyers, realizing that marriage was no longer the only way to secure a decent life and protection. They now had the opportunity to choose their own path based on their own talents, aspirations, and ambitions. This gradually changed the understanding of women's role in society and destroyed old stereotypes about their destiny. Cars, railways, and telephone communications made the world smaller and communication between people easier and faster. Young people could meet and socialize without the constant supervision of strict chaperones, aunts, and servants. This contributed to the emergence of sympathies and feelings that did not take into account the size of family bank accounts or old rules of etiquette. The boundaries between social classes began to slowly but surely blur, creating new opportunities for free choice of partner and personal happiness. Queen Victoria passed into history, leaving behind a great and controversial era of stability and strict rules. Her name became a symbol of order, which ultimately could not withstand the pressure of time and progress. The world became more dynamic, noisy, and demanding of each individual. Old contracts on parchment were replaced by new agreements on mutual respect, partnership, and responsibility, and personal feelings came to be valued almost as much as material benefits. Today, we can only guess at what those people felt in their cold and austere castles. Their letters, diaries, and notes reveal a world of hopes, doubts, and inner turmoil, hidden behind a mask of propriety and outward calm. We learn from their mistakes and limitations, trying to appreciate what we have today: freedom of choice, the opportunity to love and build relationships without external pressure. The history of marriages of convenience remains an important lesson about the price of human happiness and how social rules can influence the fate of generations. As we conclude our story, we see how much our understanding of family, love, and personal freedom has changed. What seemed unshakable 150 years ago today only evokes surprise and respect for those who lived in different circumstances. But the desire for security, stability, and social recognition still lives deep in human nature. It is important to find a balance between the material world and the movement of the human heart, allowing feelings and reason to coexist in harmony and creating one's own understanding of happiness. Marriage in Victorian England was a complex mechanism in which everyone played a role for the good of the family. We saw how money, titles, and public opinion shaped the fates of thousands of people. It was an era where calculation trumped emotion, and mansions were the ultimate prize. What do you think about this topic, and what other aspects of 19th century life interest you? Suggest topics for our future videos in the comments below this video. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new exciting stories from centuries past.